You're using Procreate, but are you using it right? These 3 tips will fix common mistakes, give you sharper lines, accurate colors, print ready files, and change how you create digital artwork forever. Let's get started. Tip number 1 is about choosing the correct color profile, canvas size, and resolution for your needs. So we're starting at the very beginning of creating your Procreate canvas. And when it comes to color profiles, there's a few very important rules to keep in mind. First, RGB versus cmyk. You probably already know that RGB refers to the light spectrum or colors that you would see on a screen, and cmyk refers to pigment colors or colors you'd see in print. A common pitfall many artists run into is they think, I need to print this artwork, so I need to create my file in cmyk. Do not, I repeat, do not do this. Here's why. The RGB spectrum offers a wider color gamut or available colors for you to use while you're creating. If you've ever made a file in RGB before and compared it to a cmyk file, the results are pretty apparent. cmyk files look duller and desaturated because they're pigment-based versus RGB, which is vibrant because it's based on light. Printers have come a long way in recent years, and printing from an RGB file many times can give you more vibrant and accurate colors than a cmyk file. Just look at this example on a basic home printer scanner combo that I'll leave a link to in the video description. Some online printers even request that you submit your file in RGB rather than cmyk. And the best part is, if you create an RGB with all those vibrant colors to work with, you can always convert it to cmyk later on. Since cmyk has a much smaller color gamut than RGB, if you start with cmyk and you want to change to RGB later, you can't magically create those more vibrant colors that you didn't have to begin with. So the rule of thumb is to always create your file in RGB, and if needed in cmyk later, make a cmyk canvas the same size and drag your layers from the RGB file into the cmyk file's layer palette, and then you're good to go. I use the Display P3 color profile since it has the wider color gamut out of all the RGB options, but if you're on an older iPad and don't have access to that, then just use the default sRGB color profile and you will be perfectly fine. As long as we're in the canvas settings, go ahead and make sure you're always working in 300 dpi, which is the print standard resolution, and that you size your canvas as large as you'll ever need that artwork at. Since Procreate is a pixel-based program, we don't want to ever stretch those pixels and reduce artwork clarity. So if you always make your work as large as you'd ever need it, you'll always be fine. Now that we have our canvas in great shape, let's move on to tip number 2, which are 2 vital workflow tips. These are 2 things that you want to avoid as much as possible as you're working in Procreate. So thing number 1 is to avoid rotating your elements. And I get that this is really difficult to avoid sometimes, so you just want to make sure you do it as little as possible. If you've rotated something and then decide to rotate it again later, just remove it and put it into that new spot. The more you rotate, the more your edge quality deteriorates in Procreate. And when your element is selected, make sure you have bilinear set in the bottom selection palette, and that will make that deterioration a little less obvious than the other available settings. And then finally, thing number 2 is to avoid scaling your elements up. It's okay to scale them down because that's compressing the pixels, but as soon as you scale your elements up, you're stretching those pixels and degrading the edge quality, even if you're working in 300 dpi. As long as we're talking about creating artwork in Procreate, now's a great time for me to mention my free Procreate for Beginners course. You'll get free brushes, free color palettes, and there are 4 fun projects all available for free. So I'll leave a link on screen and in the video description if you'd like to check that out. Let's wrap everything up with tip number 3, which is choosing the right file type when exporting your artwork. Here's a breakdown of all the different file types that you can export out of Procreate and what each one is best for. The first is a .procreate file, and this keeps all layers intact for future edits within Procreate. Next up is PSD, that's compatible with Adobe Photoshop and preserving your layers for cross-platform editing. PNG supports transparency with lossless compression, and it's ideal for web graphics and prints when you need a smaller file size. A JPEG is a compressed format suitable for web use, and it can sometimes sacrifice some quality. You will always get a smaller file size when exporting a JPEG. TIFF is your highest quality lossless format, so it's perfect for professional printing needs, and you generally always have a pretty large file size when exporting a TIFF. Finally is a PDF, and that's useful for documents or portfolios. In all honesty, I never use PDF because I can just export a JPEG or a PNG and then make my own PDF on my desktop, but that's also there if you want to use it. That's it. If any of these will help with a past mistake, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear which one helped the most. And if you're looking for more Procreate tips and tutorials, then you'll want to watch this video next. Happy creating.